Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Season 10, Episode 27 of the DFO Fantasy Podcast. I'm host Brock Segan, and with me, as always, we got Dylan D. Bertham and Michael Beebs Bondy. D, it is our Fantasy Hockey Playoff Preview episode. We finally made it to this part of the season. Season is winding down, and we got a lot of exciting tidbits to hopefully help crown some champions. So how you doing today?
Doing good. I think as of now, I got 4 of 5 teams in the playoff picture. Only one we're going to miss on, it looks like anyway, is Dynasty, which is fine. We weren't necessarily gunning for the title this year anyway. If we made the playoffs, would have been good experience for the lads, you know. But, you know, we're really shooting for a competitive win over the next 2 to 3 years. League of record, me and Brock looking like we are on a collision course in the first round. So we'll see how that shakes up. I guess if we want to look on the bright side, it means one of us definitely gets into the semifinals. So there's that, but could be a pretty frosty podcast next week. Plays out that way.
I am getting absolutely whacked right now. I mean, it's only Wednesday, but I'm getting whacked. So if I lose and you win, there's a chance I think that we avoid each other. So hopefully that ends up being the case. Because at this point, I would just don't really care who I play as long as it's not you. It would be fine. And our teams are trending in opposite directions right now. Mine is trending downward at the wrong time. Yours is trending upward at the right time. I've literally led this league in points the entire season, and now things are looking rough. But I'm in the same boat as you, looking pretty good in terms of making playoffs in all 3 of my leagues this year, and excited to hopefully at least win one of them. Beebs, me and you battling it out for a bye in one league as well. So we got a lot of kind of cross-contamination going on here. How are you doing today?
Yeah, you couldn't get whacked in that league, fella? But in classic important week fashion, we saw a bunch of shutouts on Monday, and we saw Connor Hellebuyck give up 5 goals on 26 shots yesterday. So if you're someone who rode that all year and we're like, I have the best goaltending, here you go, week 1 of many of your playoffs, and you now have the worst goaltending, which is just so classic fantasy hockey. But I think I'm gonna go perfect, but I'm only in 3 leagues, so 3 for 3 for playoffs. One of them, the one where me and Brock are actually fighting for the bye, I think I held the 1 seed for about 18 of 22 weeks. So to now be looking at the 4th or 3rd spot, let's just say the room is a little shaken up. So I'd almost rather have my fellas be in D spot, where they at least know, you know what, we're gonna have some good years ahead. Instead, we're in panic mode over there. So I made a few tweets this week about how Columbus is faithful. I've been letting us down the last little bit. So that's definitely part of it. It's tough when the guys we suggest so often who are on fire go a little cold. And we've kind of seen that in the last bit, but here we are. Hopefully they can heat back up as we head into the official fantasy playoffs going forward. And I think with this episode, we're going to be focusing on some strength of schedule and some other fun stuff. Brock, if you want to break it down before we get into it.
Yeah, I just have a quick question for you guys first. How many or what percentage, you guys aren't going to actually know the answer to this, but I want to get your feel for it. What percentage of teams that drafted Elias Pettersson this year are going to be in the fantasy hockey playoffs? Because he is heating up at the perfect time, but like, has he been that shitty of a 2nd round pick this year that he is not going to be on a playoff team? Dia, in the league that me and you are in together, the team is sitting in 5th place with Elias Pettersson. So they were able to kind of manage without him throughout the course of the season. But what did you guys, if you had to guess, D, what do you think, rough estimate on what percentage of playoff teams that drafted Elias Pettersson are in the playoffs?
I would guess maybe around 20%. That'd be a pretty big blow. You know, we talked about it, I think when we were doing like our mid-season awards or superlatives and looking at who were the biggest busts. Really, except for Austin Matthews, pretty much everyone in the first round at least delivered about top 20, top 25 value. So there really weren't any killers in the first round. You really had to look into the 2nd round with Elias Pettersson, Jason Robertson for most of the year. But obviously the 2 of them have really turned it around of late, and Pettersson obviously even more of late than Robbo. So I'm going to put it at about 20%, and then, you know, obviously puts you behind the 8 ball, but there was a lot of value to be found later in the draft that could have made up for it.
Yeah, I was oddly enough going around that same range. So I'll go 25% because that is, like you mentioned, that's a massive anchor. And I'm kind of laughing. if you drafted both him and Steven Stamkos, you would you get double anchors this year. So good for you. But both those players have turned it on as of late. So if you drafted either of them and have managed to survive, like Brock mentioned, a guy in your guys' league who is 5th, then you might be laughing right now. Or if you manage to get them at super, super low value, or even off the waiver wire. I definitely fielded questions. I don't know about you guys about Elias Pettersson potentially being dropped, which is insane. But some people play in 18 leagues, some people play in 16 leagues, anything like that, or even banger leagues, some leagues. But yeah, I'll go 25%. It's kind of like the opposite of a few years ago when it was like how many teams with Connor McDavid on their roster made the playoffs, and it was like 98%. Here we are. How many Elias Pettersson? I wish we had these numbers and we could tell.
Yeah, we'll have to try to figure it out, but Elias Pettersson, just a reminder, was drafted 22.6. So I'm going to say 30% because there's a pretty good chance that you grabbed Connor McDavid or Nathan McKinnon and were able to get him as one of the last picks in the second round. So if you had one of those guys, that might have been able to carry, but there's a chance that you drafted Matthews in the first round and Pettersson in the second round. And then that would have been a tough one because Matthews certainly hasn't delivered as the number 3rd overall pick this year. But let's get into it. As Beebs alluded to, we've got the fantasy hockey playoff strength of schedule. As I mentioned a couple times last week, just for the sake of the podcast, we're going to focus on weeks 23 through 25. We put out a poll, and that was the more popular of the two options. Fairly close these days. I think a lot of people aren't in love with the season ending at the end of the year, but still seems to be the more popular option in fantasy hockey because you lose quite a bit of games if you don't go all the way to the end. But we're going to focus on the fantasy hockey playoffs weeks 23 through 25. Going to go over the strength of schedule, talk about the teams that have the best schedules moving forward, and some guys you can scoop up on the waiver wire that might be able to last on your team throughout the course of the playoffs and be really nice long-term adds, potentially league-winning type pickups right now, or at least guys that can help you get to the finish line. So we're going to talk about 5 teams that have really good schedules kind of all the way through the playoffs and players you can probably feel fairly confident picking up and keeping on your roster moving forward. We'll also really quickly cover teams that if you are in the situation that maybe me or Beebs are in, where you're sitting with the potential of a first round bye and next week doesn't matter, who really have the best schedules in week 24 and 25. So it does shift a little bit if you do get that first round bye. And then we're going to take a quick look at just the week 23 strength of schedule to give you some streaming options for the first week of the playoffs. And then just a quick breakdown of who's got the most and who has the least remaining back-to-back. So if you're starving for goaltending help, some of these backups that might see 3 to 5 starts down the stretch could really help you move on in the playoffs. So let's start with the long-term fantasy pickups, the guys with the best, or the teams with the best strength of schedule. And number one strength of schedule for weeks 23, 24, and 25 is the Ottawa Senators. They have the number one strength of schedule. They also are tied with the most games remaining at 13. Their schedule throughout the playoffs is pretty consistent. They have the second best schedule in week 1, 18th best schedule in week 2, and the 6th best schedule in the final week, which, if you aren't aware, is 4 days longer than the typical week. So it's an 11-day week there in the finals. Beebs, I'm just going to throw a couple names at you here that are widely available on the wire. You can tell me kind of who's your favorite and why. Dylan Cousins is obviously, I think, everybody's favorite, but he's the highest owned at 42%. Shane Pinto comes in next at 11%, and then Ridley Gregg at 5%. I think you could probably throw David Perron in there as well. Just hasn't quite had, he's been pretty productive as of late. Just doesn't seem overly sustainable. But I'm assuming Dylan Cousins is your favorite. After him, who would be your next favorite?
It's a battle, and it's actually with that last name that you mentioned there. I think David Perron deserves his dues. He has 7 points in his last 9 games, and he's a player who you've seen be hot in previous years. He hasn't scored less than 46 points since 2015-16 when he was on the Anaheim Ducks, which I had to quadruple check that he even played on the Anaheim Ducks, and he did. It was a quick little post-trade action, but yeah, he's a guy who knows how to put the puck in the net, and it was proven it in his last 10 games. So it's good to see him cooking there. But on PP2, as you mentioned, we're choosing other than Cousins because Cousins was the clear one. Pinto, though, just edges out Perron, and it's just due to the shot volume. In his last 15 games, Pinto has 12 points, which is quite nice, but he also has 31 shots on goal. So he's getting over 2 per game. He's proven that he is he's kind of that type of player who's gonna drive shots on his line, even if he is on the third line. And if we're choosing between 2 guys below 10% here, I think you have to kind of nitpick the little things, and I'm going to nitpick shots on goal here. So give me Shane Pinto. He's been playing quite well for his lack of power play time for the last little bit. And then as you mentioned, Ridley Gregg probably third on this list, worth a shout out. And when it comes down to it, it's going to be just who's the hot hand in a week. And if Ridley Gregg's a little bit hotter than David Perron, he could definitely jump himself up there. But for now, for me, it goes Shane Pinto, David Perron, and then Ridley Greig. But I think they all are definitely worth a look in the deepest of leagues.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, they might be the Senators' third line, but they play a lot more than your average third line. Over their last 10 games, Tim Stützle leads the team in time on leads the forwards in time on ice. Ridley Greig is second, 1845 time on ice in his last 10. Shane Pinto's fifth on the team, 17 and a half minutes per game. So they both play a lot more than actually the Cousins line does. So they're probably more like their second line, even though they're listed as their third line. I think, again, this probably is a little bit to do with your format as well. Ridley Greig is a guy that's going to lay the body a little bit more than Shane Pinto. So I think that you could probably give the edge to Greig in a banger league where Pinto might be better in just more of a standard format. But also in that same 10-game stretch, the team leader in individual expected goals for is Brady Tkachuk. Not surprising, guy that goes the dirty areas a ton. Second on the team is Shane Pinto. Third on the team is Ridley Greig. So these guys have been, getting to the right areas of the ice. They're playing a lot of minutes, and I do think with the number one ranked schedule, especially the second ranked schedule in the first week of the playoffs, these guys could be pretty strong streaming options next week. Okay, D, that will come to you now with the Carolina Hurricanes. They've got the number 2 ranked strength of schedule for the totality of the playoffs. They have 12 games, so 1 game fewer than the Ottawa Senators. But their strength of schedule in terms of average across all 3 weeks is the best overall. They have the 8th best strength of schedule in week 1, the 11th best strength of schedule in week 2, and the number 1 strength of schedule in the all-important final week of the season. They also have 6 late night games, so it'll be a little bit easier to get into your lineups moving forward. And since the Mikko Rantanen trade, especially now with Andrei Svechnikov being out with an injury, 3 names stick out to me: Logan Stankoven 22%, Taylor Hall 5%, and Jackson Blake at 1%. All of them seeing some power play time. We know that they don't really have like a solidified top 6. They kind of just have a wishy-washy, basically 3 third lines, it feels like, or 3 second lines, but also some power play time, especially with Svechnikov out. Are any of those guys your favorite from the Hurricanes, or is there somebody I'm missing?
Yeah, I think one thing that's important to note here is that it'd be nicer if a team that was a little less fluid in their line combinations was the one that, looked to be the most consistent week over week throughout the playoffs, because you're almost certainly going to want to keep this as a bit of a revolving door, because where the lines are at right now on DFO, certainly not going to be what they're looking like in 2 to 3 weeks' time. You can almost bet on that with just how Brind'Amour likes to run things over there in Carolina. To me right now, though, the one that sticks out the most is Taylor Hall, actually, just 5% owned, playing really well of late. He's got 5 points in his last 5 games, just under 2.5 shots per game in that stretch, averaging around 16 minutes, is on that second line and power play 1. You could say that, there's not a whole lot of difference in terms of the amount of minutes that those lines get and sometimes the production. But the thing that I like about being on that line and not being on the stall line, which is, the more stereotypical third line, is just the zone starts and the matchups. The stalls are going to be taking on more of a defensive role, while that second line that Hall is on should get a little bit more attractive zone starts and utilization there. Stankoven, right now with where he's at, I'm really not interested in him. If he moves up the lineup and sees some PP1 time, then he'd be back on my radar. But talked about my concerns when he moved over to Carolina, and they're playing out exactly like that. There's really only 1 or 2 spots, more like 1, because Jarvis is pretty consistently occupying that spot alongside Aho. Really just leaves 1 fantasy or 1 spot in that lineup that's going to deliver a lot of fantasy value. So with Stankoven right now, he's buried on that third line with Stahl, going to get a lot of tougher matchups. And the second power play unit right now, he's going to have a hard time providing you with fantasy value, even with the friendly schedule, if that's the kind of usage he's seeing. So not on my radar right now, but obviously if he moves up the lineup, that would change. And then deeper leagues, I like Jack Roslovich too. He's line 2, power play 2, 3% owned. Worth a look as well. 21 goals on the season, not the highest floor, but a decent bet to pad your goal totals come playoff times. And then, I do think Jackson Blake in those deeper leagues is worth a punt as well. He's been more than anybody since the Rantanen trade kind of occupying that third spot on the top lines, just 1% owned on the top power play unit as well. Hasn't taken advantage of it quite yet, but the minutes are out. The shot line has been better of late. So he's one to keep an eye on, especially in those deeper leagues.
Yeah, like it's tough because like I think Jackson Blake it might be potentially if he ends up even when Special comes back if he ends up being the guy stays in the top power play unit, which we've seen a lot this year. He's played a lot with Aho. Like I think he's the guy that might have the most sticking power just because he's probably I definitely has spent the most time in comparison to Hall and Stankoven in that top six and on that top power play unit. The problem is he's goalless in his last 15 games, but he's averaging nearly 4 shot attempts per game during that stretch. His minutes are actually the highest of the three, 1743 since the Rantanen trade. Just a shade over what Hall and Stankoven are playing, but he's a super talented young player that has, I think, he shot 14% in his first like 50 games of the season. So like he can unlock some goal potential here down the stretch. He's not somebody I'm like rushing to the waiver wire for, but man, like I feel like he's got some untapped potential. And like, I won't be surprised if in a week's time or 2 weeks time, we're talking about Jackson Blake getting kind of hot at the right time here, but it definitely feels like more of a deeper league target right now. But just the analytics, the metrics, the numbers just stand out. And it's like, he should be the best option. It's just not really, clicking at the moment. All right, Beebs, we'll come back to you now with the Calgary Flames. They've got the number 3 ranked strength of schedule for the entirety of the playoffs. They also have 12 games. Their schedule is 16th, 13th, and second best over the 3 weeks. The real issue here is that the Flames just do not score. They do not score enough goals. So is there enough talent or enough goal scoring going around in Calgary to even make it worthwhile to pick them up? Like, are they good enough to take advantage of the number 3 ranked strength of schedule? I think it's a little bit difficult because it's like, you probably are better off streaming somebody on a higher scoring team with a slightly worse schedule. But there are 2 names that stick out to me, and let me know if they're your favorites as well. Jonathan Huberdeau, I think, is the unquestioned number 1 option if he's available in your league. He's 48% rostered, though, so chances are quite slim, about 50-50, to be honest with you. And then the number 2 name is somebody that you've actually mentioned quite a bit this year, Beebs, is Matt Coronado. So I'm sure you're about to pop off about Matt Coronado in leagues where Jonathan Huberdeau is not available.
Man, I was shaking in my little booties over here, getting all excited to talk about Coronado. At only 4%, kind of blows my mind that this guy's still this low owned, because we've seen him occupying power play 1 a lot more often than pretty much most players on this Calgary team. So 4% kind of blows my mind, but we have numbers that back up why 4% blows our mind. So at the moment, he is power play 1. He is line 2. In his last 4 games, he's averaged over 20 minutes of ice time per game, which only 25 forwards do in the whole league altogether. So as of right now, he's trending up quite nicely. He has 10 points in his last 18 games. Not the greatest production, but in those 18 games, he has 92 shot on goal attempts. 92. That's quite a bit. And 37 of those have made it through, which leads to nearly just over 2 shots on goal per game, which, as we've been talking about with previous players, we love that type of action. And Coronado being such a heavy shooter on their top power play, realistically, the only thing holding him back is, like Brock said, is just this Calgary scoring is just so abysmal. But being in that position at only 22 years old, previous former top 10 pick, he has it all right there. So if you are going to go after anyone on this team, that's not the clear Jonathan Huberdeau, as you mentioned, 52% out there in some leagues, then definitely Coronado. Coronado kind of steps out as one of the top names under 40% that we're even going to name tonight. So I just wanted to point it out because he has all those factors going for him. He's getting the time on ice. He's getting the shots on goal. These are all things that we love to see. The other night, we saw him get a power play goal and 5 shots on net. Meanwhile, Calgary only scored 2 goals total. So when that stat line comes out, you know that he's likely contributing most of their scoring. But it is good to see when that happens. And nights like that make it totally worth having him in your lineup. So I love him there. And then a completely deeper shout out. He hasn't necessarily been lighting it up lately, but he had a phenomenal night last night. But no points. It's Morgan Frost. He's currently 3%. He's occupying power play 1. He's occupying line 1 as well at center. As I mentioned, only 2 points in his last 7 games played. But Morgan Frost, his issue has always been shots on goal. And in those 7 games, he has 14 shots on goal. So that's 2 a game. We love to see that. He's in all positions to succeed. So it's someone, if you're in the deepest of leagues, you could definitely take a peek at. Unfortunately, strict center only, so he won't help you too much across all positions. But yeah, considering Matt Coronado's only 1% more owned, that blows my mind. He should be about 20% more owned than Morgan Frost. So those are my quick Calgary hits. If you are looking to find some, there are some names though, which is nice, and some lower owned names. So it's great to have some options here. But yeah, Huberdeau, 14 points in his last 16 games too. So shout out to Johnny. He has a 25-25 season again. So it's good to see him back.
Since the Four Nations face-off, the Calgary Flames second lowest scoring team in the league at 2.05 goals per game. Only the Minnesota Wild score fewer goals than they do. So that is the big issue here. But with the cushy schedule moving forward, they could potentially start to ramp up the goal scoring. Here's hoping. Okay, a couple other teams to get to really, really quickly here. The Edmonton Oilers have the 5th ranked strength of schedule, 12 games remaining. Their strength of schedule by week goes 14th, 19th, 4th. The problem is this team is very, very top heavy. I don't think we even really need to talk about them at length right now and dive in too deep, because it's basically who's ever skating in that top 6 with McDavid or Arvidsson at that time. McDavid or Draisaitl, whether that be Arvidsson, somebody that's potentially available. Corey Perry is the guy that's there with Leon right now. So we saw Adam Henrique up there. It's tough to really be like, this is the guy right now, because we don't know what that's going to be in a week's time or even in a day's time. And they got some injury concerns right now, so we'll see how that lineup shakes out. But keep in mind the Oilers, heading into next week, really good schedule. If somebody stands out in that depth chart that's available on the wire, I would make that move. The same thing goes for the Tampa Bay Lightning. They have the number 6 ranked strength of schedule, 12 games remaining. Their schedule starts off a little shaky, so I wouldn't fault anybody for electing to potentially stream somebody better next week and then moving on to the Lightning from there. But they have the 20th, 60th, and 5th ranked schedules over the next 3 weeks. The only name that really sticks out to me, D, would be Anthony Cirelli. He's currently centering in line with Brandon Hagel, no surprise there. But Nikita Kucherov's been on that line quite a bit recently over the last few games. And if that continues, I think Cirelli definitely gets a boost. The underlying metrics for Hagel, Cirelli, and Kucherov this year have been unbelievable, plays massive minutes. He doesn't have the highest offensive upside, but whenever you're skating with Nikita Kucherov, I think you're worthy of considering, especially just if teams need some help at center. Thoughts on Cirelli or anybody else from the Lightning?
Yeah, obviously Cirelli's a good shout. I think in most competitive leagues, he's probably going to be grabbed, but this is kind of the roster crunch time of the season, right? People are going to need to make tough calls, especially in this last week if you haven't entered the playoffs yet, or if you are in the playoffs, and he's kind of going to be towards the bottom of people's rosters. And who knows, maybe, someone had to make a difficult decision, even in those more competitive formats. And he got the sniffs just in order to get some extra games in the lineup. So, yeah, that's certainly a name worth keeping an eye on. And obviously, well ahead in the line compared to this next guy that I'm going to talk about. But Yanni Gourde, he's up to 6% owned, 4% in the last day. So he's been climbing of late. But I do think that he's worth a look in deeper leagues, especially in banger leagues as well. That was an area where he was always able to provide some additional fantasy value. It really went away in Seattle this year. I'm not sure if it was just the dip in ice time or what, but he was, hardly over a hit a game in Seattle this year. Since coming over to Tampa, he's got 20 hits in 6 games. So he's providing a lot of value in those banger leagues. He's up to 4 assists in 6 games with Tampa. He's seen a lot of ice time as well. Up to that second power play unit of late. He's been over 17 minutes in each of the last 2 nights, 2 hard-fought victories for the Lightning as well. So it's not like they're blowing out teams and then Gourde has been eating up some extra minutes. Seems like this could be a trend moving forward. So, maybe in the more standard competitive formats, if you get towards the end of the week and the Lightning are playing on some of those lighter nights, then sure, Gourde could be worth a shout. But in those banger leagues, I really think throughout the whole playoff stretch, he could actually provide some really good value at the bottom of your roster if those trends hold up.
All right, let's focus on the teams that might have a first round bye. So if you are just, making the playoffs, you can probably fast forward a few minutes because this probably doesn't make sense for you. But if you got a first round bye, these are the teams with the best schedules in week 24 through 25, or 24 and 25. We'll just get through these really quickly. The first is the Carolina Hurricanes, who we've already talked about. But the next on the list is the Florida Panthers. I'm just going to run through these teams. I'm going to run through some names, and then I'll throw it to each of you to kind of give me some of your favorites. Florida, we already know who those guys are. Sam Bennett's just 58% rostered. I mean, most competitive leagues, he's not going to be available, but he's been spectacular. After that, though, our guy Mackie Samoskevich is just 18% rostered. He's been just spectacular as well, skating alongside Sam Bennett, also on that top power play unit. And then Evan Rodriguez at 4% rostered, a little bit more available, hasn't kind of had this same buzz as Samoskevich has. So he's definitely more widely available. And with their new lines, he's actually on the top line with Barkov and Reinhart. It's Verhaeghe, Samoskevich, and Bennett on that second line. So potentially a nice bump there for Evan Rodriguez if that sticks moving forward. Again, we're really not looking at the Panthers until next week 24, because I think they only have 2 games in week 23. So if you got that first round bye, maybe scoop these guys up now. Hope these lines stick, these power plays stick, and then you'll be looking good in week 24. From the San Jose Sharks, we talked about a few of these guys last week. Tyler Toffoli has played really, really well, a little bit higher owned at 36%, but he actually hit the waiver wire in one of my leagues recently. Will Smith, we talked about him being pretty hot. I like him a lot more than when he's playing with Macklin Celebrini, but he's been on a really nice run. Talented young player at 14% rostered, and slightly higher than him is William Eklund at 18% rostered. So in one of my competitive leagues, Toffoli and Eklund are both owned, but Will Smith is out there. So one of these three is sure to be available if you're looking to pick up the San Jose Sharks. I talked about some of the lowest scoring teams since the break. They're not the highest scoring team ever, but they are only the 8th lowest scoring team, the Sharks. So they've been a little bit more efficient offensively as of late. One more team to get to, and that's the Montreal Canadiens, and they are really difficult to pick through because they, are very top heavy, very reliant on that top line of Caulfield, Suzuki, and Slafkovsky. Slafkovsky's the lowest owned of the three at 65%, but he's unlikely to be available in anything competitive. Same probably goes for Patrick Laine, but he is just 41% rostered, and he would be like my primary pickup from the Canadiens. I don't think I want to dive too deep into that lineup. I would focus on some of these other rosters before diving deep into that Montreal Canadiens roster. So Beebs, we'll come back to you. If you had your pick of the litter there, give me maybe your 3 favorite names really quickly that stand out to you for weeks 24 and 25.
I am legend himself first, Will Smith. He's coming in, just what he's done in the last bit, 12 points in his last 10 games, 29 shots on goal during that time. He's absolutely peppering the net. So we love Will Smith. And I don't want to stay with the same team, but I think that Toffoli too is probably my number 2. He's at 36% owned. He's by far and away the lowest owned player who's reached 25 goals at this point this year. And there's only like 30 or so who's done that, Mark. So I think he's worth it just off that goal production alone. And then off the final one, I want to go Eklund. Incredibly bad here, but just to switch it up, we'll give a shout out to Laine. We know what he's doing on that power play. I still would honestly rather have the San Jose players if it's just a straight non-banger league. Even if it is banger league, they are just cooking right now, and it's a classic case of they're on a team that's under-owned. So we'll take that when they're playing as much time as they are, shooting as much as they are. But Laine, just with that goal-scoring option, number 1 goal-scoring option on their top power play, is definitely intriguing. But yeah, I think that those San Jose guys need the love of anyone here for sure. And I think of all the names we mentioned today, they're probably highest up there for me. I'm also super future is teal biased right now. But that's just how it goes for fantasy hockey when some guys are under owned who deserve a bit more. D, who'd you go with? Who's your top 3 or 3 juicy balls who stand out?
Not a whole lot of notes. I do agree. I think Will Smith is the big prize right now. And the fact that he's still available in over 85% of leagues is certainly notable. He's just been on such a run. And obviously when a guy comes into the league with his sort of talent and draft pedigree, and, it can be easy to overlook kind of these short stretches, but like when it's someone with the background of a Will Smith, you have to take notice of it. And really just seems like he is coming into his own. And, think he's going to be one of our top breakout targets next year if this continues to end his season, because he's just been that good, and that core in general should just continue to improve year over year. But even rest of the season, give me Will Smith at the top of that list. I'd actually go with our boy Mackie Samoskevich second there, especially in those banger leagues. Like, this guy is just been a category filler right now. And I just think the Panthers are going to score more goals than any of those other teams. That, certainly not a hot take, but I'll take my chances on him finding the score sheet a little bit more often than those other guys that are on the teams that just aren't going to score as many goals. And then I would go to Toffoli third. I just think he's so reliable and so consistent, and you're not going to find really that sort of level of consistency off the wire at this point in the season. So that's how I would go it if I'm looking for my top 3 there.
All right, I will fully admit too that I was brain farting when I was trying to go at Laine.
I couldn't believe
you wanted.
I couldn't believe you weren't saying Mackie. You're like, I'll go Laine. I was like, he didn't say Mackie. I'm shocked right now.
If you could see how my brain was working behind the scenes, it was just a bunch of gears not reaching each other and blowing up. Mackie, I'm super happy you brought him up there. D, he is Brad Marchand light right now in that position, and it's awesome to have it.
The classic just brain misfire there. All right, let's focus now on just week 23. So if you didn't get the bye, these are the teams that you want to target. We have kind of a mixed bag here here of teams with really good schedules, but maybe not quite as many late night games. So be sure to check your lineup ahead of time. Check those busy nights, especially, and make sure you've got holes in your roster on those nights to be able to stream them. If you don't have those holes, you're going to have to pick up players with more late night games to even get them into your lineup. So just check ahead, make sure you've got some spots for them. But the number one strength of schedule for just week 23 is the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, do you watch this team on a night-to-night basis? They are also very top-heavy and don't have a ton of waiver wire options available right now. Like Bobby McMahon at times this year has been spectacular and a great kind of short-term ad, great streaming target. It's been a little bit quiet for him as of late. The fact that he's dropped down to the third line for a lot of the last few weeks has really hurt his stock. So obviously Matthew Knies would be number one, but he's 55% rostered. You're probably not going to be able to get him in anything competitive. I would assume Bobby McMahon is probably just the second best option, and that's kind of the only route you could even consider.
Yeah. I think in more standard leagues where you're not getting those added bonus from shots and hits, which McMahon can certainly contribute to on any given night. I do think Max Domi's just been playing really well of late. He's got 4 points in his last 4 games coming into tonight. Moved up and down the lineup at times as well, and that second power play unit's been doing pretty good lately. So it's not. Doesn't offer the highest floor, doesn't offer the highest upside. He's not my favorite play on this episode, but if you're looking for one other name to go after on the Leafs, and in terms of, you're just chasing goals or more importantly assists, I think Domi's probably the most likely to find his name on the score sheet on any given night after those big 6.
So second on the list is the Ottawa Senators. D, I'll go back to you here. Would you prefer those Pintos and Ridley Greggs to the Maple Leafs just with a slightly worse schedule? They both also only have one late night game.
Yeah, I think so. You're just going to get more consistent usage out of them. But I mean, I would just be paying close attention to the over-under and projected goal totals for each team on any given night. And, the Leafs have some really nice matchups. So maybe on those nights when they're projected for around 4-5 goals, or 4.5 goals, if it is looking like, you could get an additional 2 goals with a chance of getting a shot on the score sheet than what they're offering in Ottawa, then yeah. But in terms of just looking at the week as a whole, I think you certainly got to give the edge to those Senator guys right now.
Yeah, like the Leafs definitely have the best schedule. When you look at it, they got the Flyers, the Sharks, the Kings are a tough matchup, but then the Ducks. The Flyers, Sharks, and Ducks in 1 week is really, really nice. The Sens have the Sabres, Red Wings, Blue Jackets, and Penguins, though. So that's a real juicy schedule as well. And I agree that you probably get a little bit, juicier usage out of the Senators players. But keep in mind, both those teams with really good schedules, only one late night game. So you got to make sure you've got room for them. Beebs, a team that's got a lot more late night matchups. They have the 7th ranked strength of schedule next week, just 3 games, but all 3 of which are on late nights. They've got the Bruins, the Rangers, and the Maple Leafs next week, and that is the Anaheim Ducks. And this is an offense that has perked up, basically in the second half of the season post Four Nations face-off. They are 11th in the NHL, sandwiched between the Lightning and the Blue Jackets in terms of goal scoring, and they've got a plethora of waiver wire options right now. Basically, the entire roster is available outside of like Frank Vetrano and Jackson Lacombe. So pick of the litter here. Who are you going with, Beebs?
This team gives me the same vibes as San Jose gives me. It's the same vibes as Utah gives me. It's guys are producing, but we're not respecting them as far as their own percentage. And that's fine by me because that gives us awesome names to suggest. The first one I like to suggest, and he's been on an absolute heater in the second half, is Mason McTavish, currently number 1 center, currently top power play, 14 points in his last 13 games. To go along with that, he has 23 shots on goal. So we would like to see McTavish shoot a bit more. He's not quite up to that 2 shots per game, but if he's at that point per game level, we've seen him do it before, and he is a clear future offensive option for this team. So that it looks like they're going to kind of hand him the reins and let him lead that top line. We saw Leo Carlson have 2 goals last night. He is a suggestion there. He's under 10% owned. He's another one that is also occupying top power play. But for me, Troy Terry, he just continues to be disrespected, we'll say. He hit the 50-point mark last night, played over 20 minutes in 2 of the last 3 games. He's reached over 19 in his last 5, so he is all over the ice. It's a guy who is consistently on the score sheet and is shooting quite a bit lately. As we've kind of mentioned, just this year as a whole, he's got 14 shots in his last 4 games. He's probably my number 2 behind McTavish here. And he is also occupying top power play and top line out in Anaheim. So I would go McTavish, Terry, Leo Carlson for me, and then Cutter Gauthier also, who's been heating up lately. As of earlier in the week, he had 7 points in 7 games, but I believe that he did not get one last night, so that would move it down to 7 in his last 8 or something along those lines. So Cutter, looking good, just doesn't shoot ever. So Cutter's only going to give you apples, but while he's doing that, he makes a very good deep league. But if you're looking at own percentage, Leo Carlson's about around the same own percentage. So I would rather have him if we're taking a non-shooting future superstar in Anaheim.
Cutter shoots a decent amount. It's not a ton, but like you want to see him. You want to see him hit the net a little bit more. But I mean, 16 shots his last 7 games is not terrible. But yeah, when he's more touted for like let's just shoot the puck at all times, the shot volume has been relatively disappointing, but he's firing the puck a ton. He's just not hitting the net. 48 shot attempts his last 10 games, but less than 50% hitting the net at the moment. So find the twine a little bit more, at least just the cage a little more. Okay. Next is Utah has the 9th ranked strength of schedule next week. They have 4 games, 3 of which are on light nights. But the one busy night game that they have is Thursday, which only 10 games. So light nights, I don't think are going to be a huge issue for some leagues because there's 10 games on Tuesday, 10 games on Thursday, 11 games on Saturday. So like they're softer than most or lighter than most busy nights. So again, that's why you just got to plan ahead and take a look at your schedule because yes, Utah has got maybe 3 light night games, but they have 2 games in the middle of the week against the Lightning and the Panthers, which is obviously not great matchups, but they got the Detroit Red Wings and Chicago Blackhawks on Monday and Sunday. So bookend, great matchups, but this is why, like, if you've got the room, I much prefer these Ottawa, Toronto targets if possible. But D, lots of options in Utah. Who's your favorite right now?
Obviously, we got to start at the top. No one's going to be surprised to hear that it's Nick Schmaltz. He's just so consistent. He's still getting that run on the top line and top power play unit. So yeah, I mean, I think as much as any other name that we've talked about on this podcast tonight, if Nick Schmaltz is somehow available, I would go and grab him. And, he's going to give you plenty of help in the assist department and maybe throw in a couple goals next week as well to help you get into the semifinals. And then after that, Barrett Hayton's been a lot quieter of late. But he was on such a nice run there for, prior to the last 3 games where he's gone pointless. He's still seen time on the second line, which, this lineup is looking a lot more fleshed out than it was a year ago, at least in terms of a bona fide top 6. He's got Logan Cooley, got Dylan Gunther to skate with. We'll see if that lasts. Like they keep kind of jumping back and forth between having Alex Kerfoot on the top line with Keller and Schmaltz or Logan Cooley. So obviously for Hayton's sake, much nicer to have Cooley and Gunther on your wings than Kerfoot and Gunther. So if that holds up, then, I really like Hayton's odds of getting back into that little hot streak that he was having over the last month or so before cooling off over the last week and still getting that time on the top power play unit. But yeah, otherwise, I think that's pretty much it. I think in banger leagues as a deeper target, you can look at Jack McBain. He's getting second power play time. Just been so reliable in terms of delivering hits all season long and pretty widely available, even in those banger formats. He's been one of my favorite streaming targets to go after in banger leagues this year. He's just 7% owned despite having 234 hits. So elite stuff there from Jack McBain in banger leagues. So another name just to keep an eye on. And that's probably where I'm calling it. I mean, you can make a case that if you're chasing assists later in the week and Kerfoot still playing with Keller and Schmaltz, then he might be worth, rolling the dice on. But I just have a hard time recommending him right now for the entirety of the week because I just, if I had to guess, I think he's off that line by the end of the week. Really not seeing any power play time at all. So it's going to have to all come at 5v5. So if he's not playing with Keller and Schmaltz, he's probably not going to give you any fantasy value at all. So that is more of a wait and see for me and maybe a single game target as opposed to the whole week.
Yeah, cannot wait for someone's entire season to hinge on Alex Kerfoot on Sunday against the Chicago Blackhawks. Book it. Goal for Kerfoot coming on Sunday. He's going to win somebody a matchup next week. It's happening. You heard it here first. Okay, one more team to get to, and it's the Vancouver Canucks. Just the 18th ranked strength of schedule. It's not the best schedule. They've got the Devils, the Islanders, the Blue Jackets, and Jets. Far from ideal, but all 4 of those games come on light night. So if you're in a league where maybe the rosters are a little bit smaller and your lineup is completely filled up on those busy nights, this would be the team for you to likely target to try to get a couple extra games in your lineup. Not really a ton of options. Connor Garland, 28%, but he's banged up right now, missed their last game. Jake DeBrusk has been playing much, much better as of late. He's 35% rostered. Philip Hedl, another guy that's been injured, but he's just 4%. He's looked better in Vancouver, but we've seen his ice time kind of take a hit over the last couple of games. So, it'll be interesting to see where, Garland and Hedl are in terms of their health this time next week, or I guess at the end of this week, heading into next week. But I think DeBrusk would likely be my favorite of the bunch there. Do you guys have Beebs? You got any differing opinions there?
Yeah, there is one name that's stepping out that was not mentioned, but this could all disappear when the healthy names come back. But Niles Höglander, he's currently 1% owned. He's currently occupying line 1, and he has 6 points in his last 6 games. During that time, 12 shots on goal, 2 per game, no power play time. But if he is going to occupy that top line, and we're going to see Elias Pettersson's bounce back, if he's helping fuel that, it could definitely be a name to keep an eye on. But this is certainly a case of check daily faceoff. 4 lines. But one shout out real quick, boys, just a flashback to a year ago this time, as you're mentioning guys who are winning fantasy matchups, I think we can all recall the amount of texts we got on the Sunday of, is Artur Silov starting for Vancouver in that final game of the season last year? Because the amount of fantasy matchups that it seemed depended on this rookie goaltender starting for Vancouver, and it happened. So kind of hilarious. And us being DFO, as I believe that he started on a back-to-back was what it was. It was something along those lines, something crazy. But I do recall us breaking it on the Sunday and watching his ownership go up by the minute. So kind of hilarious. And I'd love to see Kerfoot be that guy this year. But back to pickups. One really, I guess we could kind of shout him out, but if Garland returns, don't even act like this name came out of my mouth. Jonathan Lecker-Mackey is currently on power play 1. So if you want to look into that, that could change by next practice. So anyone occupying a power play 1 is worth a look, but I'd personally rather have Höglander than Lecker-Mackey regardless, just because of his 5v5 time. But Brock mentioned it. Jake DeBrusk is the one name that stands out the most. And then Connor Garland for me.
No love for Pius Suter, 6 goals in his last 10 games, shooting 33%.
I honestly, I couldn't even believe that Pius Suter was the one with the 6 goals in his last 10 games.
Playing 17 minutes too, hilarious.
Yeah, so
the fact they traded for Hedl, and then they still are playing Pius Suter 17 minutes a night and Hedl 14% or 14 minutes a night, make it make sense. But D, somebody to add?
Talkett loves it. Kiefer Sherwood, obviously this is like, I'm not going to say it's not for banger leagues. Like, he's one of the best players in banger formats. So he's almost certainly not available in banger leagues. I think he's like
record-breaking hits,
clear.
by the way.
Yeah, I think he's like 100 hits clear of anybody else, 120 actually as of right now, which is just insane. So, of course, if he's somehow available in banger leagues, then yeah, pick him up. But he's certainly not. The reason he's 37% owned is because of banger leagues. But I do think in standard formats, with the amount of ice time he's been getting, the shot volume isn't terrific, but it's solid enough, right around 2 shots a game, that it gives him kind of this steady floor. He's right around kind of half a point a game. So I think, given the matchup spread next week and, with those 4 games on those later nights, I think he's a good bet to give you a couple extra points next week, even in standard formats. And that's where he's really still available. I actually grabbed him ahead of time in our league of record, Brock, heading into next week, just because, I wanted to make sure I got some exposure to Canucks with that Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday schedule. Whether or not I stick with him throughout the full week, we will see. But I wanted to just make sure I had some exposure to that top 6 before or without having to burn one of my weekly acquisitions on it next week. So I do think standard formats, Kiefer Sherwood, if bangers are not part of the equation, he is out there in a lot of leagues, and I do expect him to find the score sheet once or twice next week when they're playing on some pretty light nights and some pretty doable matchups.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, and this is the whole reason that we're doing this show on Wednesday and the playoffs don't start until Monday. If you are locked into any sort of playoff spot, try to do your best to just almost forego this week a little bit and just really prep your team for next week and still have the flexibility of having 4 or 5 or however many pickups you have in your league next week to then be very cutthroat with your roster decisions. But set your lineup for this week, for next week, for best success to start the week. And then, you're going to have to make those tough decisions along the way. But we're giving you these names to, scour the wire now, add them now, get them on your roster for next week. And, obviously some teams are, fighting for their playoff lives still. They don't have that luxury. But if you do, make those moves. Okay. We're going to wrap up today's show with the most back-to-backs and least back-to-backs from weeks 23 through 25. There are the most back-to-backs remaining in those 3 weeks is 3, and there are 7 teams that have 3 back-to-backs. That's the Buffalo Sabres, the Carolina Hurricanes, the Detroit Red Wings, the Florida Panthers, the Montreal Canadiens, the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Vegas Golden Knights. So the reason we bring this up is if you're a goalie needy team and you're trying to find a backup on the wire that might be able to give you 1 start a week or a couple of extra starts down the stretch here, these are the guys to target. They're almost certainly going to get 3 starts out of their backups moving forward. To me, and I'll let you guys weigh in here in a second, but to me, Vitek Vanacek in Florida, Jakub Dobeš in Montreal, and Ilya Samsonov are the 3 best options. They are on the 3 best teams. And, Vanacek, especially if Florida, maybe starts to take it a little bit easier on Bobrovsky down the stretch, he could see even more usage. Dobeš, they seem to be riding Montembeault pretty hard, but he could see an additional start or 2 if still available. Samsonov's been getting a decent amount of run as of late. Not always the most consistent play out of him, but those 3 would be my favorites. If you take a look now, Vanacek is just 8% rostered. Dobeš is just 10% rostered. And Samsonov, he was 20-something% last week. He's up to 47%, so he'll be tough. But Vanacek and Dobeš, to me, are the 2 clear-cut options there. Like Wall and Stolarz are obviously both high owned. It's very difficult to trust James Reimer in Buffalo. Carolina's goalies are both high owned. Detroit seemingly only wants to start Peter Mrazek every night. So I think you guys would agree with me on Vanacek and Dobeš. And Beebs, I'm almost willing to bet you want to jump in here and say maybe they'll call up Devin Levi just because you love talking about Devin Levi as much as possible. But Rochester is okay. Perfect. I love that. Buffalo's AHL team, Rochester, is in the thick of the playoffs in the AHL. So I imagine Levi is going to stay there and help them on that mix. I feel like you love Devin Levi for some reason. You try to mention him as much as possible.
I think I love to hate Devin Levi.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah, he just got us so excited a few years ago, and here we are watching him push Rochester to the to the Calder Cup. So that's great. Thanks, Devin. You were a plus 100 draft pick 2 years ago. So here we are. But no, I totally agree. I think Vanacek, especially with the position that Florida's in, if we see him get a little bit of a cushion into the playoffs or just into the locked playoff position that they're going to be in, there's no reason why they shouldn't give Bob a little bit of a rest, especially at his age, and they know that they're going to lean on him in the playoffs. So yeah, I agree. Vanacek, Dobes are my top 2. And realistically, if Montembeault struggles at all, they've proven that they are going to go with the hot hand regardless. So Dobes could technically take the majority of the starts if he does do what he did when he entered the league and just refuses to lose. So it's going to be interesting. But yeah, for sure, you got to go with the team in front, who's the best team of these lower owned, and that would be Florida. So Vanacek for me, I think it's a fantastic suggestion if you got the room to stash.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add, totally agree with just in terms of the guys to target that are widely available, but also just kind of solidifies the fact that guys like, Kochetkov, Freddie, Stolarz, Walls, the Leafs in particular have talked a lot about how they're going to want to have, kind of, or hopefully have their number 1 netminder figured out and solidified heading into the postseason. Carolina, kind of harder to get a read on, I would say, but I think, that fear of maybe the Leafs are going to start leaning more one way or another is really kind of mooted by the fact that they still have all these back-to-backs moving forward. So, I mean, Stolarz of late has not played great, right? He's outplayed Wall all season long, but in his last 4 starts, he's been under a 900 save percentage. Wall played really good the other night against Calgary. They're almost through 2 periods tonight. He looks excellent so far against the Avs. I'm sure I just jinxed that one. He'll get lit up in the third. But yeah, I think if you were kind of reading through all the tea leaves, you'd be tempted to say, well, maybe, Wall's going to start to get the bulk of the work down the road as they kind of gear up for the playoffs to make sure that he's the guy. But regardless, Stolarz is going to get a decent amount of work. So I just think that solidifies the fact that, those 4 guys, Stolarz, Wall, Kochetkov, Freddie, are all going to be worth holding on to at least until you get through those 3 back-to-backs. And maybe if it's looking like it's leaning more one way or another, then you can get a little cutthroat. But just wanted to bring that up because Stolarz has been dropped by a ton of teams in the last couple of days, especially with Wall getting the back-to-back starts and all that narrative playing out from Toronto that they really want to kind of iron out who's going to be the number one netminder headed into the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I bet Avs money line, so I hope you put a little hex on Wool there. But I also have Wool in fantasy as I try to beat Beebs for the first round bye. So it's kind of a one way or the other. I'll be fine. A little bit of a hedge for me. Okay, then really quickly, just want to wrap up the show with the teams that have no back-to-backs remaining. That's the St. Louis Blues and the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think for one, Tampa Bay Lightning is super interesting. Like, do they start Andre Vasilevsky every game the remainder of the season and try to win the division and home ice throughout the playoffs? I think it's entirely possible. I won't be shocked if JoJo gets, at least maybe one, to give him a breather, because I don't think you want to ride him that hard heading into the playoffs. But it's good news that at least they don't have to make those decisions of starting him on a back-to-back if they're really needing wins here to close things out. But could see a lot of starts for Vasi down the stretch, no different than what we've seen from him basically all season long. And then the Blues seem pretty comfortable just kind of rotating anyway, so it doesn't really impact them all that much. Could be a little extra starting equity for Jordan Binnington moving forward, and maybe a little bit less love for Joel Hofer, but he played really well last night. They seem still pretty comfortable to go to him, once every third game or something like that. Just back to Dobish really quickly. He started 3 of their last 8 games, so I think you'll probably see something like that continue, and wouldn't be surprised if you get 4 or 5 starts out of him for the over the next 3 weeks. So I think he's certainly interesting with all those back-to-backs. Gentlemen, I just want to give you the floor here for a second, and if one of you's ready, jump right in. Is there anybody out there on the waiver wire right now that maybe doesn't have the best strength of schedule? We haven't mentioned them that you think we missed, because we really want to focus on the schedule. You want to add players that have great matchups, but sometimes just great players can kind of make the difference. Is there anybody on the wire right now that maybe you think we missed that you want to just shed some light on really, really quickly? Anybody want to jump in first? Beebs?
Just super quick. It's been a friend of the show the whole time, but Pavel Dorofeyev's currently 40% owned out in Vegas right now. He surpassed the 200 shot mark the other day because he had another 6 shot night. He's over the 25 goal mark. He's one of 20 players in the whole league to do that. So just to get that type of production from someone who's only 40% owned, that's incredibly productive, and we do like that. And then just another few quick ones. Minnesota has not too bad of a schedule if we do look at this strength of schedule here. And our boy Marco Rossi is still only 39% owned. He's playing near 20 minutes a night. He's close to a point per game in his last 40, so it's pretty insane to see him just here at 40%. Currently power play 1 in line 1. And then if we want to go even deeper on that team, Brian Hartman's been excelling quite a bit lately on power play 1. He's playing line 3, but while he's on power play 1, as long as he's playing well, then he is definitely someone to keep an eye on. 4 points in his last 5 games. Other than that, D, I'll let you take over. If you have any names, I might have some more as we jump back in here.
No, I just got one more to throw out. I mean, there's only so much room on rosters, but a guy that I have seen hitting waiver wires in leagues is, like I said, we get to that roster crunch time of the year. He's been out for the last 3 games, I think. JJ Peterka is down to 40% owned. So yeah, even in some really competitive formats, he's been hitting the wire. He's just been so good throughout basically the entire season. He's up to 51 points in 61 games. Shot volume has been really solid of late. Before the injury, he's getting all the ice time, all the exposure that you want to Tage Thompson at 5v5 and on the power play. And he's supposed to be back from his lower body injury for tomorrow night's game, Thursday night's game in Utah. So if that's the case, he's got a clean bill of health moving forward. If he's available, he'd be a name that I'm looking to move and really almost in a lot of these situations probably give up the streamer slot for as long as possible until I get desperate later in the week come playoff time. I just think he's that good. He's got that much upside. And to me, if we're looking at 40% and under, he's the number one name I'd be checking on.
JJ Peterka and the Buffalo Sabres have the 11th ranked strength of schedule next week. It gets a little bit more difficult from there, but not terrible. 22nd and 22nd in the following 2 weeks. And they are tied for the most games remaining on the season. So maybe not the best matchups, but they do have 13 games moving forward. And then the Vegas Golden Knights, in terms of Pavel Dorofeyev, 10th best schedule next week. So obviously somebody that should be on your radar next week. 20th and 27th in the following 2 weeks. So it does get a little bit more difficult. They do have 12 games remaining, though. I think both of those guys are good shouts. Minnesota Minnesota just doesn't score all that much, but it is worth noting they are tied with the most late night or second most late night games remaining at 7. So Marco Rossi will be somebody that, even if that team's not scoring a ton, will be easy to fit into your lineup here down the stretch. 7 of their 12 remaining games are on late nights. That is going to do it for season 10, episode 27 of the DFO Fantasy Podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Again, hopefully a lot of you are still listening because you're still alive in the playoffs. Or going to make the playoffs next week. So best of luck. Hopefully you set those lineups this week, sets you up for some success. Hopefully you have a long 3 weeks ahead of you. And for those of you who started playoffs already this week, hopefully things are going well. Hopefully you have a long next couple of weeks as well. So just some programming notes moving forward. We're going to continue to come live but record once a week and just really focus on pickups, weekend streaming options for the next week to get you prepped to continue to just dominate throughout the postseason run. So best of luck. I'm Brock C. We got Dylan DeBerthi, Mike Weaves Bondi. As always, see you next week.
And since we're in the playoffs, if you ever need help, don't be afraid to reach out to us on all platforms. Let's get there. Let's win these ships.